So we're going to look at two different policies or models that make sense for commercial environments. We're going to start with what is called the Clark-Wilson policy. So Clark-Wilson policy says that users should be able to access certain programs or applications. Objects are constrained, and certain objects can only be accessed by certain programs. So the way you think about the policy is that somebody says this user should have access to this application, and somebody says this application should have access to these objects. So that's what the user can then gain access to those objects, and only when they're running those applications. So if I want separation of duty, for example, where the same person should not be able to do two things that potentially could lead to fraud, then we can just say that user Alice cannot execute both of those applications. She can do one, and somebody else will need to be able to run the other application, and that's how we separate the two duties associated with the two applications that we have here. So Clark-Wilson essentially was developed for commercial settings. The second one is more about the conflict of interest requirement, how we address that, and the name of the policy is called Chinese wall policy, and you'll see why this is an appropriate name for it. So this deals, as I said, with conflict of interests, and what you can access or cannot access depends on what you have seen so far. So what you've seen so far, if it has no conflict with the next thing you're asking for, then it's okay. If not, we're going to deny access. So how do we decide when do you have a conflict or the absence of that conflict of interest? To explain this conflict of interest and the Chinese wall policy a little bit more, let's say we have a document on a system. Now, some documents are financial documents that pertain to different banks. So Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whatever it is. So this grouping here, these are all the documents that are for Bank of America. These are all the documents for Wells Fargo and so on. Okay. Similarly, we have other documents that pertain to, let's say, oil companies. So some documents are Exxon, others Shell, Chevron, and so on. The reason we have this outer box around all the bank documents or the oil company documents is that this is a conflict clause. Chase has a conflict with Wells Fargo because they're in the same kind of business. They compete with each other. So the conflict clause is, these documents form the conflict clause. Similarly, Exxon would have a conflict with Shell and Chevron. So these documents are in this other conflict clause. Okay, so Chinese wall policy basically says a user can access any object as long as he or she has not accessed an object from another company in the same conflict clause. So let's say user Alice accesses Exxon. Okay, a document pertaining to Exxon. She can, because so far she has accessed nothing, so there's no conflict that we can see. As soon as she accesses a document from this class, from Exxon, she cannot access anything in these other classes that are in the same conflict class. So she can't access something that belongs to Shell or Chevron. Can she, then go and access a document that pertains to Chase? Yes, that's in a different conflict class. There's no conflict between Chase and Exxon. Alice can access this and this, but as soon as she does Chase, she can't access Wells Fargo. So you can basically access any oil company and any bank, but not two oil companies and not two banks at the same time. So we're basically creating these walls around sets of documents, okay, that the conflict exists across those, and that's why it's called the Chinese wall policy.